Good evening, CLC. I'm Naomi Fada. Thank you so much for joining me here this evening. So, as you know, I've been on this series of just going through, move my mic for a second, going through aspect of experiencing and knowing, pursuing the peace of God from my new book, Stitching Your Story Piece by Piece. And so this week is the second week in the book, but it's delving into this aspect of, well, what do we believe about, say, is peace available, or the history of peace? And there's a verse in John 14:27 that says, I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give, so do not be troubled or afraid. Have you ever wondered whether it is even possible for you to have peace or experience peace? Certainly, we all have a past, and maybe in that past there is heredity and genes and family issues. And so perhaps there's been threads of, anxiety or other things that have run throughout your family. And certainly, that was my experience. And that question of, well, is peace even possible? Is it even possible for me to have peace? When I talk about peace, meaning in versus anxiety in this lifetime. And so I just did kind of a deep dive into, well, what's the history of peace? In terms of, at the beginning of the Bible, you look at Adam and Eve, and they were at peace with God because they walked with him in the garden and they had fellowship with him. And it was sin that entered the world and broke that fellowship. And then they began to get worried about things, right? Because what is peace? That we're worried. That's where, anxiety stems from, is we're worried, we need to be in control. And then they began to worry about their clothes, right? That's one of the things. We're naked and ashamed. That's the first thing they began to worry about. And not wanting to be, transparent in front of God, because that aspect of like feeling, well, I'm naked and ashamed. And then as you move into the Old Testament, you have in Leviticus, it talks about a peace offering that the Israelites would give to God. So he wanted to peace with them. He wanted us to have peace. And then as we get into the New Testament, we have Jesus came as the Prince of Peace. He was the sacrifice that was paid so that we could once again have peace with God. And peace with God is, we're restoring relationship, but it's also about restoring trust, where I choose to trust, choose to lay down my worry, knowing that he is in control. And it's about building that secure connection, secure attachment that we talked about last week. And so I just want to read a segment from this, because I feel like it's easier to read it. It's more understandable if I just read what was written, rather than trying to explain it, because I kind of wrote it rather concisely. So it says, it takes time and repetition to cultivate a peaceful heart and mind. Peace doesn't come without sacrifice. In the Old Testament, a peace offering was required. In the New Testament, Jesus gave his life. Though peace is fully available to us through Jesus, we must sacrifice time and energy to pursue it. It isn't a matter of doing more Christian things. Romans 12:1 and 2 exhorts us to present our bodies as a living sacrifice, so we might know the will of God. 2 Corinthians 10:5 teaches us to destroy things in our mind that lead us away from knowing God. The fears that we talked about earlier in this book, so pause at that point. So we talked about just these fears that I have, that many of us have, that lead us away from believing God, right? We have a fear that something might happen to our family or our world or our home, or whatever our fears are, that we won't have enough. And those fears don't reflect a trust in God, and how can we speak to those fears. And so when I'm talking about taking our thoughts captive and bringing them under Christ, we're talking about, well, how do my thoughts and my actions and my words reflect what I really believe? And so it's a sacrifice to surrender our fearful thoughts in exchange for his word, right? When we're saying, well, I'm going to choose to believe his word rather than what I think, that's a sacrifice. And sometimes my own sacrifice would look like a continual conversation. God, I'm afraid, but I will not fear tomorrow because you promised to provide my daily bread. I know that you are with me and trust you to take care of today. And so that affirmation of I'm choosing to trust even though I'm afraid. This peace comes when we know God and his will from our heart, not just our head. His will is that we trust him. This trust is part of the sacrifice we make to fight for our peace of mind. We engage in the fight for our peace when, with God's help, and often with the help of others, we recognize what is in our minds that is keeping us from knowing Christ. There's so much more that we're going to talk about on this topic, but just encourage you to remember that it takes effort, and it may take this aspect of practice as we continually come to Christ and surrender. And it's just a repetitive practice of he's changing, he's transforming, he's renewing our minds, and not to give up, but to keep pressing forward in him. So as you go about your week, I just pray that continues to fill you with his peace, show you what thoughts and attitudes that might be that he is working on changing in you this week, that might be standing in your way of trusting him and forming that secure attachment. So God bless you, and look forward to seeing you in church on Sunday.
If you'd like to find out more about Community Life Church, you can find us online at clchurch.cc, also on Facebook and Instagram. Join us on a Sunday, 10:30. We would love to see you there.